As marketers, one of the most important and often most difficult parts of our jobs is reporting. So buckle in and relax, because in the next 3 episodes, we're taking you on a data-driven journey where you'll learn how to maximize your reports.
There are no reports without data, so that's where we'll be heading the road. Let's go. Sure, modern technology makes it easier for those of us focused in the digital marketing spheres, but at the same time, it can also make it harder. With so much information available to us, it can become difficult to figure out what data really matters and how to piece the whole picture together from 3,000 disparate puzzle pieces. With reporting, you often want to start at the end and work backwards. So that's what we're going to do. Optimization. Wait on a minute, you've come too far, go back.
At the end of the day, you're looking for a report, but not just any report, a specific one that tells specific people a specific story. So let's work backwards from that. The first thing we need to do is establish those specifics. What's the group of people we're making this report for, and what's the story that we're trying to tell them?
For example, is it a quarterly summary of return on marketing spend per channel for the executive team? Or is it a more specific campaign performance report for the wider marketing team? Establishing these details up front will give you a clear action plan, helping you figure out what data you need and then where that data can be sourced from.
And it's this area that we're focusing on for this video. How to figure out what data you need for your reports, why knowing where that data is coming from matters, the tricks and pitfalls and details to be cautious of, and why it's so important that marketers know these things.
Figuring out what data matters is a critical step in getting to the right reporting outcomes. And realistically, it should be one of the first things you think about. Why? Because to get the best reports, you need to think about your objectives, goals, and hypotheses before you've begun building your campaign. In fact, you should be thinking about this while you're defining the campaign strategy and scoping out the build. Now, this might seem strange. Reporting is one of the last things we do. So why do we need to start with it?
Simple. To make sure you're actually getting the data you need. There is nothing worse than getting to the end of a campaign and realizing that reporting on one of the most important aspects of it is either impractical or completely impossible because the program was simply never designed to capture those data points. By focusing on reporting early on, it ensures you're setting up your campaign to report on the things you need.
There are some metrics you might want to report on that are simple, out of the box, readily available without you needing to do much pre-work. Think open rates, click-through rates, these kinds of things. But for some reporting, these basic metrics just won't cut the mustard. So how do you demonstrate reliably with accurate, meaningful data the answers to some of those more nuanced questions that marketers are often faced with? Think questions like, when should we send emails? Or what call to action copy drives the most link traffic?
So, with that in mind, how do we know what data matters? By defining a hypothesis. At a high level, a hypothesis is a statement that gives you something to prove or disprove. It's what allows us as marketers to test campaign performance, identify our reporting objectives, and apply our learning as actionable insights.
It's important to note that none of the previous marketing questions in their original form are testable. None of them. We need to take these questions and turn them into a hypothesis to test during our campaign. For a question to become a hypothesis, it must have no assumption on whether it is true or false, be a statement and not a question, and most importantly, be specific and measurable.
When turning a question into a testable hypothesis, you must start by identifying the objective of the test. Let's take a look at an example. Here's our first question. When is the best time to send an email? This question isn't measurable, but by reframing it into a statement, like email open rates are improved when sending at 10 AM compared to 2 PM, this gives us the ability to create a testing strategy, allowing us to test email sends at those times.
Here's a tip. While a report might show the outcomes of multiple hypotheses, you should be aiming to keep each individual hypothesis simple, and only test one hypothesis at a time in any given scenario.
Once you've established what data matters, you need to figure out where that data is going to be coming from. The hypothesis created earlier needs to be clear about the key success factors you're going to be measuring. Ask yourself how you're planning to measure those things. Do you have all the systems in place to capture the results you need? Do you have UTM tracking in place? And do you need to source data from a web analytics tool for a complete view? Is Adobe Marketo Engage set up to track landing page clicks? Should we be capturing revenue statistics from our CRM?
When it comes to knowing where to source your data, Adobe Marketo Engage gives you a lot of tools to manage this through a broad range of reports and analyzers. We're going to dive into the tool shortly to take you through some of our favorite reports. But first, we need an example.
Meet Marketing Manager Josh. Josh needs to report to the leadership team on marketing performance for the quarter, but he isn't quite sure where to begin. His managers have asked him to find out whether the business acquired more leads this quarter compared to last quarter, and if so, what drove that change? First, Josh wants to turn this question into a hypothesis that increasing their webinar schedule from quarterly to monthly increased lead acquisition. With this hypothesis in mind, Josh knows exactly what information he's looking for: month-on-month program performance, acquisition numbers, program ROI, and we could even go one step further and attribute revenue back to our programs and the webinar channel. Josh knows precisely where he can find this information because it's all available in a program performance report within Adobe Marketo Engage. He can see the total campaign members alongside his newly acquired names and the success rate of the webinar, which in this instance is the percentage of people who attended. In addition to that, if he's associated a cost to the webinar, he can get some insight into the program's ROI.
There's a whole wealth of out-of-the-box reports available in Adobe Marketo Engage that are usually well suited to answering your major questions, but Revenue Explorer can be your secret weapon here. Its ability to perform pivot table analysis and output dashboards based on multiple reports can help you source and present powerful data across not just marketing campaigns, but operational processes, lead management, and so much more. Beyond knowing just what data you're looking for and where the best place is to find it, the next best guidance we can give you when it comes to the data sourcing phase of reporting is simply knowing the tricks of the trade, also known as common mistakes to avoid. It's here that we look into some of the pitfalls and traps you as a marketer need to be aware of when you're planning and building your reports.
The first most common mistake is biasing the data. Let's have a look at the performance of our webinar invitation emails. Marketing Manager Josh has done a fantastic job increasing the number of registrants across his webinars by sending more emails. In fact, his hypothesis was webinar registrations increase when 3 invitation emails are sent versus 2 invitation emails. But there's a big problem with Marketing Manager Josh's hypothesis, and it's that he wasn't looking for the whole impact. Sure, he's absolutely seen a lift in registrations by sending 3 emails compared to when he sent 2, but what he's neglected to consider is the spike in unsubscribes he's now received by sending 3 emails for the same webinar. This is called biasing the data. It's here that we as marketers need to step back and take a look at the whole picture. In Marketing Manager Josh's case above, he might not get as many registrations for his webinars by sending 2 invitation emails, but the cost-benefit analysis here might mean that he's keeping a happier and more engaged audience by doing so.
Our second common mistake looks at current versus historical state. Knowing how Adobe Marketo Engage captures and stores data is vital in ensuring you're creating reports that give you the correct insight, and looking at the current versus historical state is one crucial component. Let's take Marketing Manager Grace as an example. Her boss wants to know whether the marketable proportion of their database has gone up, since they changed their email marketing strategy 12 months ago. Grace looks at the proportion of the database that have marketable marked as true, and then looks at the proportion of the database created more than 12 months ago that have marketable marked as true, believing this will answer her boss's question. But it doesn't, because the marketability field is a current value field. To truly answer her boss's question, she would need to know the historical value of the marketable field at a specific point in time, 12 months ago to be exact. Without this, she's not showing her boss how the marketability of the database has changed over time. She's showing them how the chances of someone becoming unmarketable increase the longer they're in the database, which is not the same thing. If Grace didn't realize this error, they would be drawing false conclusions from all of this data.
The third most common mistake is around data retention policies. An interested prospect or customer can engage with a lot in a short period of time, filling out their activity log with high volume activity data like email opens, website visits, and form submissions. This data is crucial in understanding things like our customer journeys and helping to create segmented audiences, but this data does not last forever. To ensure your Adobe Marketo Engage instance is running at peak performance, there are data retention policies in place to make sure it isn't slowed down by a log of activity data. Let's look at Marketing Manager Josh again. Josh wants to find out if his marketing tactics are missing any key members of his audience, so he creates a smart list with the rule, "Not was sent any email in the past 12 months." Josh is horrified to discover that the number of people who qualify for these rules represents a significant chunk of his database. If Josh started taking action on this insight, he'd be making a big mistake, because unlike opens, clicks, or other measures of campaign membership, the historic record of a send email action is only stored on a lead's activity log for 90 days. Chances are, most of the people in his list were sent an email in that period. Josh is just looking at a data point with too short of a retention period to answer his question. If Josh was aware of the retention period for data points like email sends, he'd know that there are many other, far more reliable ways to answer his question. It's important for marketers doing a lot of reporting or data digging in Marketo to have an awareness of data retention policies. Adobe Marketo Engage have a great document that helps to highlight what is and isn't included within these time periods, and we'll pop a link somewhere in here for you to learn more.
The ultimate question, why? Why should we do this? Why does it matter? And why is it so critically important that we're mindful of all of these elements when we start discussing subjects like this? The fact of the matter is that reporting is a really important part of the job of any marketer. But for many of us, it's going to be something that we may not have much education, experience, or natural inclination towards.
But in the digital age, we have to be able to demonstrate the impact of our work on a business if we want to earn a seat at the table when the major conversations around budget, resource, and strategic planning are happening. We have to be able to back up our positions with numbers. And one of the easiest places marketers go wrong with reporting is by panicking when people ask us these questions and proving our impact by cherry-picking data and shoehorning it into our desired storyline.
We become open to things like misleading statistics, using numbers that seem like they tell a good story when they're not necessarily truly meaningful in the way that we might purport them to be. Like saying we drove 300% more website traffic when really they went from 1 visit to 3. Or hanging our entire judgment on A/B tests that haven't achieved statistical significance. Just because it may be factually true to say that there was X% growth in a metric doesn't mean that the metric is reliably repeatable or that it proves the point you're arguing it does. Flawed correlations. A plus B does not necessarily equal C. In other words, correlation does not necessarily equal causation, so be careful implying it. Just because your newsletter was sent on the same day as you had a spike in online sales, that doesn't mean your newsletter send drove the sales. You need a greater proof point like UTMs to confirm that causal relationship. Selective bias. Possibly the biggest trap of all, ignoring data that doesn't conform to your preconceived expectations. As an example, clickbait can cause a big jump in open rates, but honest reporting should include the fact that it often correlates to a big jump in unsubscribes too.
The truth is, most of us don't want to just make it seem like what we do has impact. We want it to be impactful for real. And this is why these steps are so important. To be truly impactful, you need to be able to prove what impact different tactics or strategies have, recognize where the impact is positive, negative, or negligible, and then refine, repeat, and continue to learn. You have to be open to finding failure in order to identify those pieces and eliminate them from your strategy. So, hopefully this video has given you some actionable insights that you can apply to your day-to-day when it comes to identifying what kind of data you need for your reports, how to source that data, and how to avoid the common mistakes that marketers make in this phase of the reporting process.
Stay tuned for the next 2 videos in this series, where we'll be focusing on how to analyze and visualize this data now that you have it, and how you can go about optimizing your marketing as a result of your reporting. In the meantime, happy automating!